JJ Watt over the weekend has officially become a free agent. He was released from the Houston Texans, which means he can be signed by any team officially at any moment, including now until obviously the beginning of the season. He is eligible to be signed. So a lot of Browns fans are interested. A lot of Browns fans know that the Browns are interested. They have a few questions about JJ Watt as it comes to the Browns. One, is JJ Watt still good? What does he bring? And does JJ Watt, or does it make sense for JJ Watt to come to Cleveland? Well, let's talk about it. But before I do that, I want to make sure I tell you guys to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and ding that notification bell so you can be notified whenever I upload a ton of off-season content. Really ain't slowed down from the regular season into off-season. So if you like Browns content, if you like NFL football, stick here, subscribe here, make sure you're notified so you don't miss a single thing. Also, I want to give a shout out to my patreon.com dog check tier members, and as always, I start with Michael Matique, Rob Farron, Kyle Stouffer, Lukey from Munich, David Roth, J Guy 101, Musty Taco, Joe Bobby, Keith Kirkhack, Brad Calbo, Daylon W, James McGinty, Arenda Hall, Rex Kaufman, Chad Gimme, David Molinado, Andrew Sadejo, Dylan Hill, Josh Bendor, Eric Green, Jaleel Salim Jr., Martha Krusna, Mark M, TJ Showman, Stuart Moore, Bobo Regretti, Anthony O, David Arndt, Robert Jermaine Jr., Dave Mike May, John Cummings, Andrew Hirsch, Magnifico, Paul Wilcox, Curtis Bayer, Batman, Rush Sharir, Barack Kumar, John Alver, Beerman 069, Masayua, Buds of Roland, James Nemo, Mac House, Reeve Hertz, Philip Wilcoxon, Marie Vivert, CK, Keith Anderson, Sean Barron, Gagos Pisano, Dom Guzzulo, Nick Nasty, Ian Whitaker, Colin 216, Anthony Latham, Christian, Matt Bond, Dave Strong, Michael Stone, Soul Train, Charles Work, Billy, Michael Holden Acton, Moose Gentry, Patrick F. Austin Z, Mark Burnett II, Andre Griffin, Otis Wolf, IT Rex, Greg Ehlers, Austin Bolin, Jesus Serrano, Chris Fones, Picktown Brown Backers, Mark Kahn, Max Out Dojo, and Water Bear Marketing. Thank you guys so much for joining the Patreon, for helping out that way. It is a massive help to this channel. I'm so thankful for each and every single one of you. Again, guys, thank you so much. Now, let's talk about JJ Watt and the Browns. Now, through all of this excitement when it comes to JJ Watt, it's been interesting to see Browns fans' reaction online. There seems to be a few different camps developing when it comes to the JJ Watt news. One is a group of people who don't want JJ Watt because they think that JJ Watt is done, that he's old, that the Browns should not be interested in older guys. I have hard disagreements with that camp. I think the Browns are in a position where they need to add older players, but that camp does exist. Then there is the camp of Browns fans that does not want to get optimistic about a guy like JJ Watt, a former Defensive Player of the Year, a bona fide NFL star, signing with Cleveland because, one, it's not the thing that kind of happens here, and also they're worried about Pittsburgh getting him or some other contending team that's going to end up biting the Browns in the butt that he is a free agent. So there are those two camps, and then there's the camp that admittedly I'm in that definitely wants JJ Watt and wants the Browns to go after JJ Watt with everything that they can. I feel like he's one of the top priorities. You know, Leonard Williams is a nice free agent, but he's going to be very expensive. JJ Watt might be able to hit that sweet spot there, and you're in a position, again, where you don't have to invest long-term in somebody, because if you look at this Browns roster, you are invested in enough young players for the long term. Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward, Wyatt Teller's going to need an extension in a year. Ronnie Harrison's going to need an extension in a year. You already extended Myles Garrett. What are you going to do with Denzel Ward? You have a hard enough time committing long-term to the young players, Baker Mayfield, Nick Chubb, on your roster, right? You are already going to have a hard enough time committing to the dudes already on your roster. You don't need to complicate things further by bringing in younger guys or more young guys to add to this that you're going to also commit to long term. Just not in the position to do that. You have enough young guys. You're worried about retaining all of your young guys. Now you need to add veterans that might want to be here for a year or two. Maybe it makes sense for them to be here short term to this mix. And that is why I'm so interested in JJ Watt. But let's answer that first question, right? Is JJ Watt still good? Does that camp that thinks he's done toast have anything to really support that? Well, let's talk about that one. So JJ Watt is obviously a bona fide, future Hall of Fame, bona fide NFL superstar. He has had top 10 pass rushing PFF finishes 7 times in the 9 years of his NFL career. There's only been a couple of seasons where he didn't finish in the top 10 officially when it comes to PFF. One was his rookie year. The other one was a season in which he only played 3 games. And another one was where he was on pace to finish in the top 10. He only played 8 games, so he didn't qualify for a top 10 finish. So he has put in the work and consistency over the year, obviously. But also that level of play has not really gone down at all from the last 2 years when he was still considered to be JJ Watt to now. So it's not really like he's had a drop off or that he hasn't been the same player in a couple of years and the Browns are taking some kind of risk. Last season, he was pretty much JJ Watt, top 10 edge rusher, top 10 edge defender, and that's what you're trying to sign. So the question is JJ Watt's still good? It tends to point to yes. He is a top 10 run defender from 2020. He's also 6'5", 288 pounds. And as he gets older and, we could say less athletic, but I don't think he's really going to diminish that much athletically over the years. He's versatile. He can still play inside and out. And having somebody who's versatile and very good is what you want. Now, some people are going to look at that and say, well, how much of an upgrade really is JJ Watt to what the Browns had in somebody like Olivier Vernon? Well, let's compare stats, right? Because if you look at the sack numbers, I can see how you can come to that determination because the sack numbers were low for JJ Watt. He only had 5 sacks. Miles had 12 sacks last year. I believe Olivier Vernon even had more than the 5 sacks that JJ Watt had. So some people are pointing to that as that's why he's done. But in the NFL and in football, period, sacks are an important stat, but they don't tell the whole story. There's a ton of other stats that matter. And when you compare all the advanced stats against a guy like even Myles Garrett, who we know is really, really good, then it starts to get really favorable that JJ Watt has not really lost anything over the last few years. Myles has 32 pressures. He has 29, 12 to 11 hurries. JJ Watt had more knockdowns than Myles Garrett, more tackles for loss than Myles Garrett. Granted, he played in 2 more games, but these are all numbers that indicate that not only is JJ Watt still good, he's still very good. Top 10 edge rusher, superstar quality player to be next to Myles Garrett. And these numbers indicate that if you put him on a defensive line that's going to have Sheldon Richardson maybe, definitely going to have Myles Garrett, and that he could be primed to have a big year because these are numbers, right? When you see a pass rusher that has a ton of pressures, there's a ton of hurries, there's a ton of knockdowns, there's a ton of tackles for loss, it tells you that they have no problem penetrating still. They have no problem getting back there. It's just sometimes he's not able to get back there fast enough. And when you are double teamed and triple teamed as much as JJ Watt, and we've seen this with Myles Garrett, these numbers kind of indicate that that player is being bottlenecked by lack of help on the defensive line. So if JJ Watt comes to Cleveland, there's strong indications with these numbers that he could have a really good year to where they're talking about JJ Watt as a resurgence almost, even though I don't think his level of play has really dipped at all. I also hear this criticism of JJ Watt, which I don't think is fair. I get where people are coming from. I just don't think it's fair, which is he's injury prone. And yes, he has had a couple of seasons which happened back to back where he had injury problems. But other than that, he's been a 16-game a season guy. And he did come back from an injury from last season and play 16 games this year. I don't think there's an injury issue with him. I think he's completely healthy. So that is answering the question if JJ Watt is still good. I think the answer to that question is absolutely yes. It's really not that big of a question mark. He's still very much, in my opinion, JJ Watt if you look at everything. So the question, if he's still JJ Watt, well, what does that bring to this Browns defense? How does that make this Browns defense better than it was last year? Well, let's talk about that one. The number one word and the main word I think Browns fans should look for this offseason, and I think the theme word of the defensive offseason moves that this team's going to make is versatility. This team had a severe lack of versatility, right? There are reasons, real reasons, why this Browns team at times could play teams really good, have great defensive. Their defense was the reason the Browns won a couple of the games this season. So the defense wasn't as bad as some people have like talked it down to being. It's just that this defense was not versatile. So if there was a team that did things that the Browns, as the roster was constructed, were able to stop, the Browns were able to stop that pretty competently. The issue with the Browns was that they weren't adaptable, right? You saw this in the second half of games, is that they weren't really adaptable. And it's because they weren't versatile with their personnel. Now, to be fair to the personnel, a lot of the versatile pieces got hurt. Greedy Williams and Grant Delpit were huge divots in this team's ability to be versatile. But that's the one thing the Browns need. And what J.J. Watt brings to this defense is versatility. Again, he could play inside. He could play outside. He's a great pass rusher still. He's a really good run defender still. He brings that versatility. And when you're a defensive line like the Cleveland Browns that does not rely on blitzes a ton, having that versatility with your defensive line packages, being able to shift around who's going to be placed where and kind of shuffle the cards like that can go a long way in simulating pressure and helping that defensive line be able to get pressure without blitzing. And that was the biggest problem that this Browns defense had all season, is that, yes, there were games where Myles Garrett was getting pressure like crazy and this defense looked pretty good. But there are also games where Myles Garrett didn't have it going at that level. Maybe he was tired. Maybe he wasn't on the field and they weren't penetrating enough, or at least consistently enough to bail out what the issues, the known issues were going to be with this secondary, the second that we had some key injuries in that area. And I think the biggest issue that Andrew Berry needs to solve in this offseason is that this defense has had a over-reliance on Myles Garrett, and that has had a negative effect on Myles Garrett's play. Part of what happened at the end of 2020, yes, part of that was the virus. Another part of that is just what happens to Myles Garrett at the end of every season, which is he is exhausted by the end of the season. He physically just can't go as hard as he goes all season. He always starts the season hot, and then he kind of drifts off at the end of the season, and that's because the Browns over rely on Myles Garrett. He gets worn down so much during the beginning half of the season, and then teams throw everything at him. By the time you get to the playoffs, he is exhausted. This isn't just this year this has happened. This has happened literally his entire career. And if it weren't for him getting suspended for the last 5 or 6 games in 2019, you would have probably seen the same thing happen there. You need to get Myles Garrett help, not just because it's going to make Myles' numbers look better, but it's going to make Myles' career last longer. It's going to keep Myles fresh later in games. It's going to make sure that your defense is better, because when Myles is out there looking like Myles Garrett, you really don't have to worry about everything else that's going on with that defense because he's so good. So bringing in J.J. Watt to not just be help, but be a legitimate top level pass rushing partner with Myles Garrett that he has not had in his NFL career, I think is critical. Look what J.J. Watt did when they got Jadeveon Clowney in the draft. He had 2 of his best seasons in his entire career where he had like 20.5 sacks and 17.5 back to back. That's what you need to do. And the Browns, if they have failed at one thing, I think they have tried to get too cute. And this isn't on Andrew Berry because this is multiple different GMs. But I feel like GMs have tried to get too cute when it comes to helping Myles Garrett over the years. We tried first with Emmanuel Ogbah. We're going to get the young and up-and-coming guy and work with that. didn't work out. Then you got Olivier Vernon, a one-time Pro Bowler, a veteran on the rise, somebody who would be very similar to what signing Carl Lawson would be in free agency this year would be, where you're getting a young and up-and-coming guy that you're kind of betting on to hit his prime in the second free agency team, and it just didn't work out, right? You got Olivier Vernon. It didn't really work out consistently to the level that you did. There were flashes here and there, and it didn't. So stop playing around. We have done the Carl Lawson route. We have done the draft a young guy route to put next to Miles. We know what the Browns need to do. They need to stop wasting his prime and get a legitimate, bona fide superstar to help him out on the other side. And maybe you might see the best out of both of those guys in that situation, and you'll have a monster defense just by doing that. So that's what he brings to the Browns. He brings a better defensive line, a better run defense, a veteran presence, and also legitimate, real first-class help from Myles Garrett, which he hasn't had his whole career. So that's why the Browns should do this. Now let's talk about, should J.J. Watt do this? So this is a weird place for the Browns to be in, but yeah, I think this makes sense for J.J. Watt. I think this makes a ton of sense for J.J. Watt. One, the Browns are a contending team, so that check is off the box, right? The Browns are legitimately a team that were about a touchdown away from making the AFC Championship game. You can argue a better defense away from making the Super Bowl last season. That's where they're at. They are a destination for anybody looking to contend. So they have that. They also have the cap space to not only bring you in, but add to the defense and also make it so that, yes, you probably, if you're J.J. Watt, going to take a pay cut, right? You're not going to make the $17 million in free agency that you were going to get paid by the Texans. So you're going to take somewhat of a pay cut. But with these other teams, right, Kansas City and Pittsburgh especially, the pay cut would be drastic, right? You would be talking about going from $17 million to $3 or $4 million a year. With the Browns, they could offer you 8, 10, 12. They have the cap space to do that. So you're not taking the biggest pay cut if you're J.J. Watt. And also, I think this is honestly the best situation for J.J. Watt. I don't think a team offers the same amount of competitiveness when it comes to how good this team should be. The Browns have great offensive help, one of the best offenses in the NFL, and also you can pair that with a good defensive line running mate. In Pittsburgh, I get it. You can have all three of the Watt brothers on one team. I'm sure that has somewhat of an appeal to them, even though I'm not in their heads. I don't know how much they actually want to do that, but also you would be asking J.J. Watt to take a pay cut. He would be on a worse team than the Cleveland Browns, and they would be asking him to do a lot more in Pittsburgh, right? That's a 3-4 defensive system, so he's going to be standing up. He's going to be in coverage sometimes, and I don't think that's going to suit him to the best of what his abilities are now. A team like Kansas City, they're going to have to ask you to take a pay cut. I don't think the help on the defensive line, while Chris Jones is really, really good, he is not Myles Garrett good, in my opinion. He's not the help on the other side of the edge that Myles Garrett would be. So if you look at all those things, you look at all the contending teams that are going to be trying to get J.J. Watt in the offseason, I think the Browns have the best combination of all of these things to offer a really attractive package to a guy like J.J. Watt. Now, will it get done? I have no clue. I don't know what J.J. Watt's looking for. I don't know if J.J. Watt knows exactly what he's looking for. If he's looking for a contending team that he doesn't have to take a massive haircut to play for, and a team that can reasonably give him enough assistance on the defensive and offensive side of the ball, Cleveland is a great destination for him. But that's just my thoughts on the whole J.J. Watt free agency situation. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. But again, guys, thank you for watching. Have a great day. Have a good night.